Good afternoon. I would have liked to have joined you earlier today, as I understand the program has been intense, informative, challenging, hopefully inspiring, and perhaps even a little demanding. It is important that we make demands, not only of ourselves, but of everyone that has a role to play. Obviously, the fashion industry and leaders within the fashion industry, governments, consumers, multilateral institutions, other global industries, civil society, journalists, media, academics, educational institutions, and influencers. To create real and lasting change for our environments and society, it would demand that we come together to design and develop a fashion industry that can overcome the challenges of today and rise to the opportunities of tomorrow. How do we improve the social and environmental performance of textile operations? How do we achieve supply chain simplification and transparency? How do we influence consumer behaviour? How do we exploit new technology to achieve better systems to track materials? How do we implement industry standard indexes in a complex global production environment? And how do we ensure compliance? How do we integrate new business models like the circular economy that has been so intensively discussed during the day? All these questions start with how do we being the operative word. I'm convinced that if we have to have any chance of succeeding in reinventing the fashion industry, it will require collaboration never seen before between all actors at all levels of the industry and beyond, joining together with a shared mission. And this is why Copenhagen Fashion Summit is such an important event and platform for driving forward the industry's commitment to change. It brings together industry leaders, and it's positive to hear that so many commitments to change have been made from today's speakers, panelists, and discussion leaders. The fashion industry is huge, and it continues to grow rapidly. According to current growth projections, it will double in the next 10 years, generating up to 5 trillion annually. It's not just big in terms of revenue, it also employs 60 million people around the world. And it's one of the largest consumer industries, and consumption drives the global economy. It is an industry with great influence and importance, and it is an engine for development. However, the fashion industry is one of the most resource-intensive industries in the world and leaves environmental, social, and ethical footprints. Sadly, in the past 50 years, 60% of the Earth's ecosystem has been depleted, and natural resource consumption is expected to rise by 3 to 6 times by 2050. As stated in the Pulse report, global population is expected to reach over 8.5 billion people by 2030. The global middle class is expected to triple by 2030, and the current industry growth projections translate to even greater competition for cheap production. With this in mind, how do we design a fashion industry for the future that respects and protects the environment and reduces existing inequalities? A big question. So that's just as well that there are so many reflected by the attendance at today's summit that are gathered, committed to finding the answer. The third Fashion Summit was held on April 24 in 2014, marking the one-year anniversary of the Rana Plaza tragedy in Bangladesh, a tragedy that brought the world's attention to worker safety issues and the human costs of cheap, fast fashion. It also nudged a further shift in the sustainability of the industry, being primarily driven by economic interest, to recognition of the environmental and social aspects as crucial factors in moving towards a more sustainable industry. The Bangladeshi ready-made garment sector's growth has been a key driver of development in the society. The downside of the growth in this sector was that neither factory owners nor the government paid sufficient attention to working conditions, safety, and labour rights. The Danish Minister for Development Cooperation and I visited Bangladesh just last month and witnessed some of the changes that are taking place in the industry. The textile and clothing industries provide the most important source of growth in Bangladesh's rapidly growing economy. Bangladesh is the second largest exporter of ready-made garments next to China, and annual exports account for over 80% of the nation's export earnings. The sector also employs around 4 million workers, of which an estimated 60% are women. The garment sector has provided employment opportunities to women from rural areas that previously did not have any opportunity to be part of the formal workforce. This has given women the chance to be financially independent and have a voice in the family and local community because they now contribute financially. Studies have shown that women working in the sector have better opportunities to support their families, they have more choices for family planning, and that they invest in their children's education and postpone marriage. Whilst in Bangladesh, I had the opportunity to visit one of the factories producing for international clients and export. It's important to mention here that such factories are often a stark contrast to factories producing for the local market. I had a tour of the production facilities, healthcare, childcare, and a chance to speak with some of the employees. It appeared that structural, electrical, fire, and the working environment safety measures were all taken. There existed employee welfare programs. They prioritized sustainability and CSR compliance. Even though tangible improvements in many factories have been made, the progress relating to workers' rights, working hours, holidays, low wages, and the rights to organize themselves in unions remain a challenge. Although there is still much progress to be made, growth in the RMG sector has brought about and continues to bring with it new opportunities and new challenges. From a development point of view, my visit only confirmed that it is in the best interests of Bangladesh and the international community that the industry in Bangladesh develops in a sustainable direction for the benefit of employees, producers, and consumers. That will require governments, workers' unions, factory owners, international buyers, and other organizations to continue to identify and address the shortcomings of the sector. The good news. The good news is that the fashion industry is characterized by speed, creativity, and change, and that by reinventing itself, the industry can both mitigate its negative impact and generate a high amount of value for society while also protecting profitability. According to the Pulse of the Fashion Industry Report, which was launched earlier today, it's estimated that the world economy would gain 160 billion euro annually if the fashion industry successfully addresses both the environmental and social issues. Design. Design is at the heart of the industry. And according to Lewis Perkins, president of Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute, I quote, "The industry is still designing products to be made with rapidly diminishing resources in ways that are toxic to our water systems and not mindful of the labor force that creates them." His viewpoint is that reducing consumption isn't a realistic ambition. Therefore, we need to design products that are less harmful to our environment and the labor force that creates them. So why is reducing consumption so unrealistic? Well, because as stated earlier, we are seeing a growing global population and a growing middle class. And this growth will only drive a soaring demand for apparel. And we must also recognize how extremely difficult it is to get people to change behaviour. Even when we, the consumers, have the right intentions and rationally understand the need to change. There are, however, new groups of consumers increasingly looking for products that make them look and feel good, and which are also good for the planet and society. The industry needs to try and better understand the behavioural drivers behind this change. How does the industry need to speak to consumers? Is it to our emotions, our irrationality? Or is it the industry's obligation to design better products so consumer behaviour that has proved so difficult to change isn't seen as a key driver in reinventing the industry? Getting to where we need to be requires leadership, bold leadership at all levels, from governments to designers to producers. Strong leadership globally, regionally, locally. Leaderships that looks beyond the obvious, for example, to other large industries such as shipping, for inspiration, learnings, and of course, potential collaboration. Leaders that demand systematic change and transparency. Leaders that are willing to take a stand, even if it means risking stability in the short term, taking the responsibility to mitigate the negative impact based on a growth plan for the future that exploits new opportunities and accelerates the positive impact they have in society. A vast number of positive efforts are being made across the industry, and this should be recognised, learnt from, and applauded. However, often these initiatives are based on current solutions and existing setup. And whilst they bring about some change, it is only incremental and cannot drive the exponential change that is required. And this is where leadership, again, plays a decisive role, by consolidating and realigning efforts and resources to generate the greatest impact possible, but by designing system-wide action that involves a broad coalition of stakeholders, by establishing a regulatory framework for a global industry, by engaging and encouraging the gradual removal of unsustainable products from the marketplace, and by driving large-scale change across value chains, impact areas, and geographies. The summit becoming a yearly event reflects the need to intensify all efforts from all sectors within the industry. And with the new global fashion agenda, we have a convening body on a global scale. It's so encouraging to see industry-wide support for this agenda, because only with a unified front and unified efforts do we have any chance of tackling the environmental and social challenges facing the fashion industry. I'm looking forward to following how your commitments are turned into concrete actions and how creative strategies are used to consolidate initiatives for widespread collective action and exponential change. I've posed a lot of questions, and there are many more questions that will be asked, need to be asked and answered in order to accelerate the change the industry wants and the world needs. Fashion reaches beyond clothing and into the ways we choose to live our lives. Help us choose right. You are all part of an industry that has inspired and led for generations. Now be the inspiration and lead us to a clean future. Thank you.